So in this section of the presentation, I just want to give us a chance to play around with the self-knowledge piece, and then we'll manipulate some of the reflections to change the prompt and see if we're happier with the outcomes of the reflection. So if you want to look on your handout, when you print this out, you'll print it back to back along the short side, and then you'll get a little booklet. So when you look at it this way, it doesn't look like the pages are in order, but they would be if you'd print it that way. And we're looking back and forth between page 2, let's try it, these skills that Henry Jenkins talks about as the skills needed in a new media culture, and mapping those characteristics and how strong you think you are in any one of those. So what we'll do first is take a look. So you can pause the recording, look at the word, the definition, and then you're going to plot on this spider diagram where you think you lie on the continuum for each one of these. So say, for example, play is the capacity to experiment with one's surroundings as a form of problem solving. If you think you're a very playful person and that's a really good description of you, you'd plot yourself far out here on the continuum. If you think it's not at all like you, you'd plot it here in the center, and then anywhere along the continuum where you think that's appropriate. You'll do that for all of those. And then you'll see, once you plot it and fill it in, you'll see this is what your spider diagram would look like. And then you'll do one other thing. You'll come down and you'll identify what's your strongest area, and you'll put that here. And then where are the area or areas where you feel like you could use some improvement, they're not as strong as they could be, and they're things that you would really like to improve or change. You'll list those here, and then the final thing that you'll do is to think about something called a critical incident. So you'll think about what's an area that's a particular challenge for you right now. So for example, if we used the area of online learning, so that's something that's getting to be really big on our campus, and many people are challenged by how to make that a reality on our campus. So if that's our challenge area, a critical incident in that area would be something important that's coming up, or something that has happened that was a struggle. So right now we're going into a shared program where we're partnering with another campus to build a partially online program. And so that's a very critical incident in the area of online learning. So you want to identify your strength, an area to work on, and then identify your biggest challenge area and also a critical incident within that. And then go ahead and start the recording again. Okay, so you've identified those things, and now we want to look at the quality of the reflection and how to tweak that reflection to get better, perhaps more meaningful responses. So typically, we may have a reflection that looks something like this. How have your strengths and weaknesses enhanced your life or created challenges for you based on the examples you gave in the table on the handout? So for us, we may be very satisfied with the answer to that, but if we give that kind of a prompt to our students, we may get very generic and maybe not very deep, or maybe not very thoughtful responses. Would we be happy with these results? And this is really where I was before I started to do a little work and say, how can I improve the quality of the reflections? And so from that, some of what I found from Brookfield in his critical reflection for educators, he talks about the critical incident questionnaire. So you identify this area of challenge and then a concrete incident that illustrates this problem area, right? So once you do that, you're able to put more flesh on the bones through this reflection. It's not just this kind of ethereal thing you can't get your arms around. So that's why I had us all do that piece of it. And then you go into this kind of very thoughtful process about how to craft the prompt. So on the other handout that you have, you can follow along, and what we'll do is just talk through how might this prompt change, and in different ways. What would the outcomes be? What different insights might you get from those different prompts? So one of the first resources was called Reflection Quantifying a Rare Good, and they had 6 different ways to foster reflection in different ways. So say, for example, we're still thinking about your challenge area and that critical incident. So the program planning meeting for the shared program with online learning. And I want to think about this challenge in terms of my strengths and weaknesses. And could, imagine that the meeting had already happened and didn't go so well. So what could I have done differently, if anything? So you can see how it's a very targeted, very different way to think about it in a concrete way. So you could also ask students to think about in terms of premises and conclusions, or you could get them to think about it from a different perspective. What would managers think? What would coworkers think? To get them to think about it and reflect in different ways. You could, again, replay it, what might be different, or you could do what would be your intentions if you were faced with a similar situation? What could you do differently and why? Or what would success look like the next time? Describe that, and why would you think that was a successful outcome? Another way that you could think about this would be to write about the critical incident at different points in time. So we typically think about reflection as something we look back on after the event, but we could also do it in anticipation of an event. So say we know that this meeting was challenging, and so now we have another one coming up. We could think about one of those new skill areas, so like playfulness, and actually plan to practice that area in an upcoming meeting. So ask students to create a reflection based on a plan for something in the future. I would also say to remember that students may be at different places developmentally in terms of their ability to be reflective. So you want to consider that as you're trying to give them feedback. Where are they in that scale, and meet them closer to where they are and help them to move to the next level. You could also should think about the role and importance of imagination in crafting the reflection. So get students to think about what if statements, right? So what if you or your team were already really strong in the area of, say, playfulness? What would this situation have looked like instead? What would it look like to outsiders? What would you be doing or feeling if you were a person who was really strong in this particular characteristic? So the role of imagination in helping us to see alternatives and to look at things as if they could be otherwise rather than being stuck in what is can be really powerful to the reflective process. And finally, to uncover assumptions. So what are the underlying assumptions and the implications that go along with that in any given situation? So finally, if you were given this critical incident, describe what the assumptions might be on both sides. So for example, in the online learning meeting, maybe you have people there who think that developing online courses is a very simple process, and what would the implications of that be, right? You might not have the resources you need to actually bring it to fruition, right? So, and were group members even aware of their assumptions? So how could you describe that scene with different assumptions? How might the outcomes be different? So think about this now in terms of, have we traveled farther with those different reflective prompts than we would have if we had just stayed with where I was, with this very kind of simple and general, maybe oversimplified request to reflect? Students might have gotten to those other places, but probably not. And so I think those prompts can be really useful and hopefully very powerful way to help students change in the ways we hope that they will and can.